I couldn't sleep that night. My son kept texting me, asking if we could move on. Every message sounded calm, almost rehearsed. But I wasn't looking for another apology anymore. I wanted the truth. The next morning, I drove to the bank with every receipt and every screenshot I'd collected. The manager looked over the documents, then quietly printed one more page from the transfer records. I almost missed it. There was a small payment made just minutes after my truck was sold. It wasn't much money, but it was sent to an auto repair shop across town. That tiny payment changed everything. I drove straight there. At first, the owner claimed he didn't remember anything. Then I placed the receipt on his counter. His face changed. He disappeared into the office and came back with a folder. Inside were security photos. My truck, my son, and another man standing beside him. The repair shop owner admitted my son had brought the truck in a week before I left town. They replaced the VIN sticker on one of the doors after it was damaged. He assumed everything was legal because my son said he had permission. That meant my son had been planning this long before I packed my suitcase. The betrayal hit harder than I expected. This wasn't a bad decision made in panic. It was a plan. I sat in my truck for almost an hour staring at those photos. I kept asking myself where I had failed as a father. Was I too trusting? Too forgiving? Or had I ignored warning signs because I loved him? What would you have done if your own child betrayed your trust like this? When I finally got home, my son was waiting on my porch. He smiled like he thought the worst was over. I laid the folder on the table without saying a word. He opened it. The color disappeared from his face. His hands started shaking. He whispered, "Where did you get these?" I looked him in the eyes and answered, "From the one receipt you forgot about." For the first time since this nightmare began, he had nothing left to say. But what happened after that wasn't revenge. It was something neither of us saw coming. The day I found out my truck was gone, I honestly thought there had been some kind of mistake. I had just gotten back from a work trip, and the empty spot in my driveway didn't make any sense. I called my son, expecting him to tell me he'd borrowed it for a few hours. Instead, he sounded nervous. "Dad, I was going to tell you." Those 6 words made my stomach drop. He claimed someone had offered him a great price for the truck and said he believed I wouldn't mind because I had talked about buying a newer one someday. None of it sounded right. That truck wasn't just another vehicle. I'd spent years restoring it with my own hands. Every scratch had a memory behind it. I asked him where the money was. He hesitated before saying he'd already used most of it to pay off debts and help a friend who was going through a hard time. The more he talked, the less I believed him. I asked for the buyer's name. He couldn't remember. I asked where they met. His story changed. I asked how the payment was made. He paused so long that I already knew he was lying. Something inside me told me this wasn't just a terrible decision. It was a carefully planned betrayal. Over the next 2 days, I called the DMV, the bank, and everyone I could think of. Every answer created another question. The truck had been sold with paperwork that looked surprisingly complete. Someone had gone through a lot of effort to make the sale appear legitimate. Then I found something strange inside my desk drawer. A folded gas station receipt. It wasn't mine. The date matched the day my truck disappeared. On the back, someone had written a phone number in blue ink. When I called it, an older man answered. The moment I mentioned my truck, he went completely silent before quietly asking, "Are you the Betrayal owner?" That question sent chills through my entire body. I knew I was finally getting close to the truth. What I heard next would completely change the way I looked at my own son forever. The man on the phone asked me to meet him at a small diner just outside town. He carried a worn envelope and looked just as uneasy as I felt. The moment I sat down, he slid a bill of sale across the table. "I bought your truck in good faith," he said. "Your son told me everything was legal." I recognized my own signature at the bottom of the page, but it wasn't mine. Someone had copied it almost perfectly. He reached into the envelope again and handed me copies of the cashier's check and a handwritten receipt. The check had been made out to my son, not me. Then he said something that made my heart sink. I thought something felt off. That's why I kept copies of everything. As I looked through the paperwork, one small receipt slipped onto the table. It was from a print shop. The date matched the week before I left town. I remembered that store. They specialized in document printing and custom forms. That was it. The missing piece. I drove there immediately. The manager checked their records and found security footage. My son had walked into the store carrying copies of my old truck title. He had ordered replacement paperwork and practiced my signature several times before printing the final documents. There was no misunderstanding. No accident. He had planned every step before I even packed my suitcase. I took every document straight to the police. A detective reviewed everything and quietly said, "This receipt is what ties the entire case together." One forgotten receipt. That was all it took to destroy every lie my son had built. A week later, he called me asking if we could fix this as a family. I told him I still loved him because he was my son, but love couldn't erase what he had done. Trust isn't something you can replace with another apology. The investigation recovered my truck, and the buyer got his money back. My son was held responsible for his actions, and for the first time in his life, he had to face the consequences instead of running from them. Looking back, losing my truck hurt. Losing my trust in my own son hurt even more. But sometimes the hardest lessons are the ones that finally force people to change. If you were in my place, would you have forgiven him after everything that happened? Let me know in the comments. If this story meant something to you, share it with someone who believes trust should never be taken for granted. And if you want more emotional family stories like this, subscribe to Family Betrayal. Sometimes the smallest piece of evidence can reveal the biggest truth, and one forgotten receipt changed my family forever.